In a game very famous for rolling all kinds of dice, it's natural to want to use those babies as much as possible. But should you? When should you ask your players for a dice roll? Let's talk about it. Before we begin answering this question, let's try to understand why we shouldn't just ask for a dice roll for every action the players take. The reason is because it would be extremely annoying. Let's say that our players are currently standing at the front door to the Suncrest Tavern, currently filled with cheer and laughter inside. The door isn't locked, but when the players say they'd like to go inside, we ask them for a strength check anyway. After all, they are technically using their muscles to open the door, so, you know. The DC is low, but the party rolls really poorly, meaning they can't open the door. Too bad. Better start breaking windows now. This is ridiculous. We don't want our players to roll for anything that they'd obviously be capable of doing, like opening an unlocked door. I know there's some tough doors out there, but we're playing a fantasy game. Can we just not struggle with that for once? So the first thing to ask yourself whenever a player wants to do something is there a chance of failure? If the answer to that question is no, then you shouldn't ask for a dice roll. But then you wise gurus may be asking, well, isn't there always a chance of failure? You're right. Realistically, there's always a slight chance that when you go to open that door, you slip on a banana peel and die. Alright everybody, time to whip out those D100s and see if today's the day. Jokes aside, you're the game master, so if that's the way you want to run your game, then be my guest. Just make sure to let your players know beforehand at least. Usually a good rule of thumb is that there should also be some kind of consequence for failing the action. Most of the time, if there are no consequences to, let's say, kicking down a door, then there's nothing stopping the players from just redoing that over and over again until they succeed. At which point you might as well have let them kick down the door just the first time. Rolling to kick a locked door down would make sense if there are other authorities nearby that might investigate a loud banging noise. This risk would realistically increase the more times the players fail, thus having consequences for doing so. For certain things, it can also be the difficulty that increases the more you fail. This is something I've seen Matt Mercer utilizing with lockpicking, for example. The more the players fail at picking a lock, the more they mess up the insides of it, making it harder to pick the next time. Meaning, the next time they try picking the lock, the DC is actually higher for that attempt. And at some point it just goes so high that it's impossible to open it. So there are many ways that consequences might appear, just dependent on which action and the circumstances. A rather important, or perhaps the most important thing to consider when asking for a roll is the story. Specifically, will failing this particular roll prevent the story from moving forward? For example, if it's something that's crucial to the story, like deciphering a magical scroll that contains the location of the ancient artifact that the players are after, or spotting an important NPC heading into a dark alley. Please be careful letting the dice decide whether they get that information or not, as this could very quickly halt your story or, depending on the circumstances, prevent it from completing. However, there are ways to move the story forward while still allowing your players to roll in these situations. Let's take the magical scroll containing the location of an ancient artifact as an example. If we still want the players to roll an Arcana check in this situation, we can change it from the dice deciding whether they get the information or not to deciding how many details they decipher. If the players beat the DC for the check, they know the exact location of the artifact. If the players don't beat the DC, they only decipher a few words, leading them to grasp the general area where the artifact is held. Either way, the players aren't left with nothing, but instead they have something or some kind of lead to go off of. You can also let skill checks decide the time it takes rather than deciding success. Depending on the circumstances, this can be an exciting way to increase the tension in a situation. For example, a thief opening an important treasure vault. In this situation, they might roll really low on the check, meaning that they struggle with this vault just long enough for guards to spot them right as it opens. This way, failing a skill check still has consequences while not being that brick wall that prevents the story from moving forward. Personally, I'd say that keeping the first 3 questions in mind when determining whether you want to ask for a roll or not will take you most of the way there. But there is one more question to ask yourself. What about success? Specifically, will you allow players to roll in situations where success is impossible? Let's say the party faces an inhumane being that's about to attack them, and one of the players tries to persuade the being not to. You, the game master, know that this being cannot really be persuaded. It's acting more like a programmed robot than some kind of living being. Would you call for a roll? There's definitely an argument to not letting your players roll, especially if a natural 20 means success in your game. It can be the right choice to spare your players the frustration of failing when they roll a natural 20 with a plus 10 bonus to persuasion. But I think there's also an argument to allowing your players to roll in these situations. The player is attempting something that in a normal situation would have a persuasion check along with it. By allowing them to roll in this situation, you are acknowledging their action as well. But you have to make it clear in the being's reaction that something is different. That despite their persuasive words, it seems like the creature doesn't even reflect on itself, or something like that. However, it highly depends on your rules regarding natural 1s and natural 20s. If natural 20s mean guaranteed success in your game, I'd be very hesitant to allowing a roll in this situation. And instead, I would probably just explain the unaffected reaction. The last thing I want to share with you is that it's okay to mess this up from time to time, and you probably will. It's not the end of the world if you ask for a roll when there are no consequences or any of the other points I've mentioned in the video. I just hope that these 4 steps help you get a better grasp, so you won't have to worry about it as much. With that said, I hope you have a great day or night, and may the dice roll in your favor.